Carrot Cash Flow is part of the Modern Grower Podcast Network. Check out some of our other shows like Carrot Cash Flow, the Growing Microgreens Podcast, and Farm Small, Farm Smart. Learn more about the shows using the link below. Welcome to Carrot Cash Flow. I'm your host, Diego, D-I-E-G-O. The show is back. Thanks for waiting. More episodes coming starting today. There'll also be a lot of other new podcast episodes coming out in the near future. As a result, there won't be a Carrot Cash Flow episode every week, but I'll be trying to put them out consistently once, twice, maybe 3 times a month if things work out well. But there will at least be one podcast put out by our podcast network, the Modern Grower Podcast Network, per week. More details on that to come, but for now, let's jump right into it. It's Startup Farming with brand new farm owner, Alec Smith. It was interesting when you emailed to me, you mentioned permaculture voices, and as I get older, I worry that some people don't even know what that is, but that was the conference that I held starting in 2013. That kicked off me doing podcasting. It was about 10 years ago. And you mentioned you were following along back then. What was it that caught your eye about farming 10 years ago that never died out to today?
Yeah. Right around that time, actually, I came home from college. I did a study abroad program all over Europe, all over the Caribbean, and got a job working on a conventional tomato farm in my hometown up in Tennessee, and demystified by what conventional ag would look like, and realized, man, if there was ever a part of me that wanted to be a farmer, I don't want to sit over a 55-gallon bucket putting bags of potassium nitrate into a giant cauldron of water and stirring it so we can put it out on the field. And I think that really was the beginning of me looking into, there has to be a better way to this. And like probably a lot of millennial people my age, I watched Food Inc. I believe it was Food Inc. Saw Joel Salatin, this whole idea of permaculture, and it was like, oh my God, this is it. This is the magical recipe to feed the world and heal the earth. And then the next step would have been getting on YouTube and trying to find more content. And I believe that he did a talk, the Permaculture Voices, and then just going down the YouTube recommended list rabbit hole, found Curtis. I think that was really the moment where I was like, oh, you don't have to have acres and acres. You can do this on a small scale as an individual or as a small group of people and really support a community and support your family by doing this in a regenerative, very lean way. And then I think from there, it was like I got bit by the bug and never let it go.
And you had no farming background prior to that, no family farming, anything like that?
No, none whatsoever.
What was your career path at the time coming out of college? What was the plan?
I was in between things, but the goal was go into music, be a musician. Also grew up in the church, so going down that sort of like church music sort of path. That's what brought me to Georgia, brought me to Atlanta, and I was in between gigs, I guess you could say, and working at a coffee shop. And that was the genesis of realizing, like, connecting with people and connecting with food through that sort of was like the stepping stone to get me to that.
It's interesting because a lot of people do see those movies or some inspirational videos on YouTube and they're like, yeah, they get super psyched. And I saw this through the conference. People get crazy motivated to do some sort of change. But then a lot of people, they stall out when it comes time to using that enthusiasm to actually create a change. And I think where people struggled a lot that I saw was, yeah, I do want to make a better food system. I'm excited about that but at the same time, like I have to make a living
Yeah.
doing that. And that's where the enthusiasm would die and say, hey, I got to pay my bills at the end of the day. So I'm just going to do whatever. And then they start doing whatever. They get busy, life takes over. And then the enthusiasm that they previously had wanes. When you were working at the coffee shop, going down the music path, in that YouTube rabbit hole, as you're exploring that, did you start to think, all right, I can make farming a career?
I think there was a very idealistic dreamer part of me that said, come hell or high water, I'll make it work one way or another. But I coming from working on a conventional farm, that was a very close knit family. Like the mother made us lunch every day in the home, and I watched the sort of the real life tension of like how do we pay the bills. I think there was always this sense of reservation of I like this may be a challenging road to go down. This is not a get rich quick scheme. And so I think there's always been a dream that I could support my family, that I could make this a reality, but always with this kind of realization in the back of my mind is like that you're not picking the path of least resistance for sure.
You think is it farming that's not the path of least resistance, or is it owning your own business that's not the path of least resistance?
Now that you mention that, it could be more that, because also a bit of a serial entrepreneur. I think this would be venture number 3 that I've done. And I definitely would probably agree with that it could be more just running your own business, whether it's construction or landscaping or agriculture.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Of farming gets this bad rap, but entrepreneurship goes unscathed. That gets glorified on social media. And people who start Subway franchises and gas stations and everything else, like they don't always make it. It's hard. And I don't think farming is just hard because it's farming. I think inherently, anytime you run a business, it's hard. There's definitely been times when I've been running Paper Pot where I've been like, this is going to be a tight month.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? And I'm on the other side of farming from growing the stuff. So I think it's always challenging. When you worked on that conventional farm, what were some big lessons that you took from that in regards to ag as a career?
I would say a lot of times when you learn lessons, it's more of like you see mistakes or shortcomings and you learn from kind of other people's mistakes in that. And I would say that obviously the easy one, that it's like it takes hard work, takes a strong back, so on and so forth. But also realizing that it can't consume you. We would work like 8 to 6 most days, and the father and the son had been working 2 hours before I got there and worked 3 to 4 hours after I got there. And when I watched it consume their life, and then I look back now, still knowing that family, that none of the children are in agriculture. They were committed to the family farm, whatever. They've since sold off their parcels of land and moved on. And so I would say a huge lesson is just like knowing your boundaries, knowing where you can draw the line. And I know there's been amazing farmers, and even including farm I'm working on now, they really talk about you need to be able to delineate between like family and home and the farm, and know when to shut it off, know when to walk away. So I would say that's probably the biggest lesson that I learned there. And other with that, I would say is really lean on your community, lean on the people that surround you. It was a gnarly thing to watch because we would do, I want to say 50,000 tomato plants, just something completely hard to imagine now, hard to imagine me doing something like that nowadays. And we'd fill a warehouse with 3 pallets high of cases of, buyer would just pull up with an 18-wheeler and say, here's the price I'm going to give you. And if you didn't like that price, you'd say, okay. and would just drive down the road to the next place. And there was real no sense of what if we could actually provide this to the people around us. And there was this thing of being knit to the system that they became slave to. And so yeah, I was always asking, like, how come you're not doing a farmer's market? Take all the tomatoes, but then also other things, and sell to the people down at the bottom of the mountain in town. Like, they would love to buy this stuff. People talk about how great your stuff is. And, and there was just this disconnect of, that's just not how the system works. And we could never really make it work that way. Organic is just it's just a marketing scheme, so on and so forth. So I'd say those are probably the two biggest things that I took away from that experience.
Did it rub some of the shine off that dream of ag that you had, seeing it in reality, working the hours, working the hot days?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I said, doing fertigation on huge acres and acres of that, and you're just sitting there, this is not farming. Like, I was supposed to be like picking things and planting things, and when all that work gets subbed out to a crew, and you're just doing things like fertilizing and stringing up tomato plants. And so it definitely took the idyllic countryside living shine off of it, for sure.
Taking that vision that or the reality you had then, and applying it to where you want to go, do you see a path that's a compromise between what's necessary to run a farm and not having that all-consuming automaton farming lifestyle?
Yeah, I would say, even in the decisions that I've made to lease the property that I'm at, was very conscious about, did not want to live on the property. And I think that was from both on that conventional farm and then the organic farm that I've been working on for the last several years. Seeing how it can so easily consume your life, it was like, is it worth the 20-mile drive to go from my house to the farm property every day? And in some ways it's like, oh yeah, in the short term of, oh man, I'm killing it on gas, everything like that. But then to realize, it's like, when the sun goes down or when it's time for dinner, I can just wipe my hands and just be like, I'm done for the day. And there's no, oh, let me run out with a headlamp and go do something after dinner. I have these like hard lines of delineation. So yeah, that was a very conscious choice that I made to do that, to avoid those sort of pitfalls.
Yeah, I think that is a key. It's hard when you have a business at your fingertips at all time. It almost becomes, in a way, a form of substance abuse. Like you can't put it down, even though like somebody might be like, hey, take a break, or yourself, like, all right, I can't touch this stuff tonight. And then it's like you get a little bit of time, and if it's just easy to slide over, it's, I'll just slide over and do this.
Yeah. And it's not because it's, oh my God, I have to do this or I'm behind. It's anybody who starts a business, like, you would hope that there's some part of them that's like a burning passion to, man, I can make a living at this. This is like a need that I'm filling. And it's, I want to give every waking hour I have to it. And yeah, so it's not like this, like I'm being drugged back in. It's like you said, it's like a substance abuse. I just want to get as much as I can, and I'm forever chasing that dragon.
Yeah, totally. And it's, I don't know if it's good or bad, because I have that much passion, because you do miss other things. Like you said, like you have kids sometimes and they grow up not to want to do what you did because they saw what you did. And I think a lot of people get into entrepreneurship and specifically farming for this lifestyle that they envision. And then they take this lifestyle and they work through it. And you would have had more free time.
Yeah.
Just working a job. Now, you might not have enjoyed that job as much, but I could argue, hey, most people can find some sort of job that they like, versus an 85-hour, 30 weeks a year job that some people they burn out too much. Yeah. When you look over it moving from the conventional farm, fast forward ahead, You worked at an organic farm for a few years here in Georgia. What was that experience like, going from conventional to something more small scale? Probably along the way, you learned a lot just through YouTube and other things. Now you're on a farm like that. How did that change your perspectives?
Yeah. So to back up, go from like the really demystifying view of like seeing what a big conventional farm can look like, and then finding this like honeymoon period of, oh my God, there's a way that you can do this, and permaculture and market gardening and all this sort of things. And then like rebuilding this sort of edifice of optimism. And then the first day that I get to Crystal Organic, it's, hey, I just need you to go weed the garlic beds. And that was like, that's the working interview. We're just going to put you to work, and realizing, oh, no, this is really not that much different at the end of the day. Like, it's still a lot of work. It's still a lot of, like, it's still hot. Market gardens aren't magically not hot and sweaty. Any other hard outside job is. But it definitely, it was a great sort of realization that I had found myself surrounded by a group of people that really cared deeply about what they did. It wasn't just this is my job and this is what the family does and this is what we do to pay the bills, but it's, no, we've chosen to be organic. For goodness sake, Nicholas has been farming on this property since 93. It's a conscious choice every year for him to be recertified and to continuously go the organic route. So it was definitely a great encounter to be able to realize that, oh, no, you can still do this on a larger scale, because it's not a small farm it's not a third of an acre, but you can do it with this sense of purpose and with this sense of dignity for the earth and for the plants and for the people that you're providing for.
When does the switch flip from I want to work on a farm to I want to run my own farm?
I would argue that there was never really a switch flip, but it was more of a means to an end. It was more of, I want to own my own farm. I'm going to do this. Back during the pandemic, I started an edible landscaping company because it was like, I don't have property to really grow my own food other than just a small garden at home. And so, you know what? I'm so itching to do this that I'll just start a company to empower other people to do it. And so it was never really this, I'm going to get a job on a farm to fulfill this desire that I have. It was like, no, this is an intentional choice from day one. Even in my interview, like, I'm here because I want to be a sponge and learn as much as I can from you and to gather as much experience and knowledge so that I can then go out to do this on my own.
I don't know if I've ever asked this of anybody. What is it about wanting to start your own farm? Maybe another way of asking is, why do you want, or why did, and you still do, want to start your own farm?
Yeah, I know for me personally, there's always this sense of, if you have that entrepreneurial bent to you, like, you can't help but want to do something yourself in a way. It's like you see someone else doing something, like, that's great, but I think it could be done better, and I think we could make it more profitable. And then also realizing that we all have our own little niches. We all have our own little subsets of culture and communities that we're a part of. And, for 2 years now, I have begged and pleaded friends and family to come support the farm that I work for. You can tell people, like, treat it as if it was my own farm and come and do this. And it's, oh, that's awesome. And these people buy stuff from me. Like, they are very loyal customers, even on the small stuff I'm doing now. And but something about it, not like you not having that ownership, I realized there is a whole like untapped resource of people like the town that I live in versus where the farm is, there's a whole untapped resource of people that I know will support this, and then I know will greatly enjoy fresh, amazing produce that's grown locally, and they just need to have that touch point of a person that they know that does it to thrust them into that sort of thing. So I'd say for me, like that, those were the two big things. It was like I was going to start my own business at something. Like that's just how I'm wired. And I've had this passion for agriculture for a decade now. And when realizing I found my untapped resource. I found my community of people that are rallying behind me to support what this is doing. And so it's like now it's time to take the leap and to make it happen.
So is it you being able to affect a local food system? Would that be a big driver?
Yeah. I try to be realistic. I think being 30 and seeing the condition of the world and the food system and all that sort of stuff, you can just put all of your eggs in the basket of I'm going to be the change I see in the world. But I'd be lying if I said that didn't play a factor. I feel like it probably does for most people, but that's definitely there. But I try to keep that somewhat subdued and keep it on the back burner, so to say, to have a more realistic mindset on what I'm doing.
And now for people listening, you're in Texas, right?
No, I'm still in Georgia.
Sorry, Georgia. Okay.
Yeah.
Where would you say you are in the farm startup phase right now? If it is a brand new day, it's midnight, where are we on the clock?
I would say so about I have the property, like I've secured the property, I've secured startup capital, and I am in the sort of the build out phase, I guess you would say. Out of all of the possible square footage that I have to work with, I've managed to form about a third of it into my permanent beds. Just reskinned the greenhouse that hasn't had greenhouse plastic on it, and reorg. Because let me back up, because I guess it would probably be good to have a little bit of context. The property that I'm leasing, I'm not the first person to farm this property. It was started however many years ago. Young guy, super passionate, probably a lot like myself, and had a gentleman who owned the property and was like, great, let's make it happen. And they built everything out, put in the fencing, put in a greenhouse and a propagation house, built a barn, wash packed the whole thing. And then he didn't even make it through the first summer. And it was just like, I'm done. So the property's just been sitting there waiting for someone to acquire it. So I'm not starting from scratch in the sense of it's just a bare piece of a pasture that we're working into. But yeah, so I'm probably in the very early stages of that initial build out.
Okay. I'll say technically you haven't, we have to play some semantics here. Technically you haven't farmed yet. Like you're not growing stuff and haven't sold it on the farm you own yet.
Yeah. Nothing's been sold. I do have some stuff in the ground, like,
okay,
stuff for overwinter, but yeah.
All right. What do you think are going to be the biggest differences in transitioning from working on a farm to owning a farm based on what you've seen and what you think is going to come?
The biggest differences are taking over the responsibility of like succession and crop timing, crop planning, because those are the things, even though we have a lot of responsibility on the farm, like we don't make any decision when it comes to when are we going to sow 2 more beds of arugula. That's just, hey, I just need you to go do it. And it's okay. And then I try to reverse engineer and be like, all right, so it's been 2 weeks since that one and about 3 weeks since the one before that. And then so I'm trying to do that. But I'd say that's the biggest, that's one of the biggest ones, is just taking over crop planning and succession And then obviously taking over the financial risk for sure. Because if we have a bad week or we don't sell enough at market, like it doesn't affect my paycheck because I'm trading hours for wages. And so now suddenly I'll be responsible for being able to stay cash positive.
What was it like when you first paycheck switches off, transition over to your own business? You had run a few before, were on the farm version of your entrepreneurship phase. Now it's all on you. Do you notice or feel more inherent pressure?
Yeah. And to clarify, I'm for better or for worse, I'm juggling both right now. So I made a decision, have a wife, have two amazing little kids at home, and actually spent I guess this past season, the 2023 season, and did do maybe about an eighth of an acre, a quarter, yeah, probably about an eighth of an acre of permanent beds on my personal property. And so building a little bit of a client base and trying out some of my methods to see if I can actually make it happen. But for the time being, I'm still working at the farm and will be presumably working part-time until I can get to a point where I either can't handle that workload anymore or become financially in a place where I can afford to take that leap. I have a sneaking suspicion it'll probably be the former rather than the latter. But so I'm in between two worlds, being a flashlight farmer, like literally working a full day and then leaving the farm and then driving to the farm to then like, all right, let's try to make a couple more beds. Let's try to seed some trays of lettuce in the seed house. Let's try to do this and that, whatever. So I'm definitely have like a foot in both worlds right now.
So it's like a true on the side startup right now.
Yeah, a true side gig.
Yeah, which I think is good. And I think that resonates with a lot of people. First year, we'll say, I'll say 2024, even though I know you said you have some stuff in the ground. What's your goal for total area under production in 2024?
It depends on how optimistic I'm feeling that week, but my total possible production is just over 3/4 of an acre. Like in the picture that I sent you that you saw, that cultivated area is about 3/4. But I'm hoping to do about half of that. If I can have half of that in cultivation, like actual production, and then have the other half, ideally not laying fallow, have it in cover crop to either transition from one plot to another or to slowly add more production as the season, as the years go on.
Okay, so that's about 3/8 of an acre. That's half of your 3/4. What time do you estimate on average per week you'll be able to throw at that 3/8?
I've been shooting for right now. So I'm still working full time. So right now I'm putting in probably about realistically probably 10 hours a week right now. So that's literally it's work until dark and then work on the weekends. And then but hopefully come once the build out phase is to a point, come late winter, early spring, hoping to devote a solid, like reasonable part-time hours, somewhere in the 20 to 25 to 30 range to that.
Do you think, based on your past experience, obviously, I'll pause. You have to get all the startup stuff out of the way. That can be a can of worms. That takes however long it takes. But hey, you get through that's all set up. Do you think that that 25-hour range is enough to get everything done you need to get done for your goals in year one?
I think so. It's definitely, it's a little vulnerable to like just put out there yes or no. I'm pretty hopeful and pretty optimistic that I'll be able to. I'm trying to be realistic with the idea that it's maybe I don't need to plant so as intensively. maybe instead of doing 4 rows of Salanova per bed, maybe I just do 3, make it a little more, maybe a little easier to cultivate in between rows. Obviously, it's a little less production, but because it's not my sole form of income, I'm not as dependent on that yet. And I feel confident that I'll be able to manage that with that amount of time. And then also willing, like, nothing's too sacred. If I realize that 3/8 is just kicking my butt and I can't either commit more time, then I need to scale back, or I need to lean things out to make that a possibility.
I think it's a good answer. I want to talk about that now because if we talk later on, you could look back in hindsight and say, oh,
Yeah.
what was I thinking? That's either plenty and I was
Yeah.
able to do more, or no way, that wasn't anywhere near enough. With a first year farm, well, I'll say first year any business, there can be a lot of goals. One can be this thing has to pay for itself. I have to start building a customer base. I have to get used to making all the decisions. I just can't let it financially capsize me. Or it could be this thing's got to be a moneymaker in year one. It's got to more than pay for its costs. It has to add to the family's bottom line. Like, we need the money. It's got to work. Like, I got to be out of my other place. I know you're okay working the split hours. I think it's important for anybody to have some sort of goal established, because that helps you set expectations. Because if you're like, hey, this has to pay a full-time income in year one, but I'm only going to work 25 hours. Then if 25 hours aren't enough, you scale back to match the land management requirements to your hour requirement. And that's inherently probably going to bring income down. If you have a really overzealous financial goal, you take on too much, you work more hours. First year of anything is going to be tough. What does success look like if we sat and talked next November 9th in 2024? What would you say would mean a successful year at that point?
First off, that it pays for itself. And I've taken steps to try and ensure that barrier to entry is as low as possible, like negotiating with the property owner who's generous enough to be like, all right, so if you're paying this much every month in rent, and it's okay, that's what I'm paying. I was like, can we offset that to where I don't start paying until July? So then I have the whole end of winter and spring to try to get cash positive before I actually start owing you any money. When he was like, yeah, that sounds good with me. He wasn't doing anything with the property anyways. It's gravy on top for him. So definitely number one would be breaking even on paying those sort of things. And then, increasing customer base. I would love in my business plan, I think I had my goal, which might be wildly optimistic, but I crunched the numbers and feel like it was manageable, was to either be doing like $1,000 a week at a farmer's market through kind of the main growing season, or somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 CSA customers, like per week. And so I would say, stay cash positive or break even, and like cover my expenses.
What range is that? What range do you need to be in to
like an actual dollar amount?
Yeah, is that like 20 grand, 30 grand?
Somewhere in the neighborhood. I have like a month by month breakdown a little bit better. That's just how I budgeted everything out of, like, all right, if I buy all this equipment and I break it down, just monthly budgeting makes a little bit more sense to me. And it's kind of, so let's see here. So it's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 10 grand. I'm trying to do this really lean.
Yeah. So if you bring in 10 grand top line, at the end of the year, if all your expenses are paid, that leaves you with zero. Is that basically your break even? Like if you made 10 grand, your break even?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's yeah, that's just covering expenses, and that's not even paying. That's no profit toward me. That's just kind of covering costs.
Okay. So if we were talking in November 9th, 2024, 1 year from now, you made $10,000. Are you happy? Are you pissed? Are you like, yeah, good, but I wish it was better?
I would definitely, I would probably be upset if that's all I was able to make, especially because if I go based upon my 1 year goal, the farmer's market that I'm eyeing right now, it's 20 weeks. So that should, and if I'm hitting my $1,000 a week, that should be somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 grand.
Yeah.
And so,
You'd be taking in 500. So it'd be half your estimate. Either the market's not performing or something
yeah.
happened on the farm.
So at that point, if I'm only breaking even, then yeah, I mean, I would be, that's half of my time a week, basically working for free, which I've done before. And, did that for a couple years on another business venture, actually that coffee shop that I was helping get started. But yeah, so I would say that's my end goal would be like, all right, we brought in 20 grand this season, this year. So I'd say that's probably my that's what I'm shooting for. Yeah.
How is that first year? How do you view it as a building block for the future? What I mean by that is some people could say you broke even the first year, waste of time, like you wasted a year and you came out flat. But if I can tell like you're obviously having an entrepreneurial mindset, like you're looking longer term and you have to look at more than just the income statement at the end of the year if you're planning on doing this down the line. So how do you view that first year? If it's, let's just say it's whether it's 10 or 20 grand, I think they're relatively similar. I know it's 10 grand apart, but it's
Yeah.
not like 10 versus 100. If you fall in that range, how do you view that is a building block in the future? Because I don't think you could sit there forever. But in year one, there's some give and take, right? So how do you view year one as a step for years 2, 3, 4, 5?
Yeah. Let's say if you look at what I saw as like going to be the biggest transitions from working on a farm to running a farm, it's like I get a year under my belt of making all the shots on what we plant and when we harvest. And so it's easy to say now, it's like, oh yeah, I'll look back and it was a good learning experience. We really learned a lot of lessons. The bank account might make me feel otherwise. We'll see. But definitely realizing that even though I've read a lot of books, watched a lot of YouTube, listened to every episode of Farm Small, Farm Smart that exists on the internet, I I'm there's still mountains and mountains of things to learn. And I'm trying to go in open-minded and from a place of like this is the classroom in a way.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to school and seeing it as so like when I started at Crystal Organic, there was no formal apprenticeship program. There's no, yeah, you'll come work for us and we'll teach you how to farm and do all this sort of stuff. But telling them day one, I'm treating this like an apprenticeship. I'm going to ask you more questions than you probably want to be asked. And they're going to be dumb questions, but I'm just trying to get as much out of this time as I can. And so I'm really seeing year one as almost like graduating from, all right, so I've got my 4-year degree and now I'm going, it's like, so there's a check. I've got a lot of knowledge. I've got a lot of this. And now it's time to go work on your master's. And that's how I'm viewing this first year is it will be a step forward, a little more responsibility, or a lot more responsibility, but you know, more of my own direction, but definitely still in this process of learning and growing and developing what my methods will be, how I'm going to do this. I'm not just going to take a book and be like, JM said this, so this is what I'm going to do. It's everything from one property to another is so different. Really trying to look realistically at the 24 season is kind of apprenticeship 2.0 that will hopefully like an apprenticeship that will pay for itself.
Yeah, I was going to say that free school is what popped into my head.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's proof of concept in year one.
Yeah.
I have this idea of how I want to run a farm. I need to prove that it makes sense. And I'm starting to look at this like with products more of, you can order 1,000 of something. And if you might think, hey, this will do really well. And if you don't sell it, well, you're storing 1,000 pieces of it. You've sunk cost into 1,000 pieces of it. It takes forever to get rid of it. You start with 50, try and sell it. Hey, it goes well. You sell out, you go out of stock for a little bit, but I've proved, okay, people want this thing. Now I can order 100. Those go, now I could get 200. And it's that difference between going from 0 to 1,000 in one step to baby steps. And it plays off this idea that I've been kicking around for a while. I haven't really done much on it, but it's like this idea of slow farming, where it has to be, and like the S would be sustainable, meaning not necessarily environmentally, but financially and mentally, physically, and time-wise for whoever's running it. Because if it's not financially sustainable, you can't do it. If it's not mentally sustainable, you can't do it. If it's not physically sustainable, you can't do it. And if the hours aren't sustainable, if it takes 100 hours to run year one, that's not sustainable in the long term. So I like the approach, given that year one is your master's, it's your prove it year. What does year two need to be if you're thinking ahead
What does
today?
my what need to be?
Year two. What does year two
two
look like? Yeah.
Year two is the main goal is just to get on the farm full time, like to be there. Like there's no, it goes from being the side hustle to the only hustle, or at least the main hustle. Because probably like yourself, there will always be something that you're dabbling with on the side. But I would say year two is definitely full time. And I would love to be utilizing the full extent of my property by year two. It's not going to be 4/5 of an acre or whatever it is in like high production, like high intensity. It's like baby greens as far as the eye can see. I'm definitely trying to be realistic and like, all right, so this third of the property is probably going to be mostly like low rotation. The things that are not necessarily high profitability, but because I know that I probably can't utilize all this space by myself or with a little bit of help, that it's then I've got the property, it's sitting there. I don't have to do any real additional expansion of breaking new ground or acquiring more land. It's let's do winter squash. I was super pumped about doing sweet potatoes, except we just finished digging all the sweet potatoes at the farm, and now I'm like, maybe not. It's a lot of work, but so I would say like the two biggest things would be, being able to go full time, and then being able to utilize the full extent of the cultivated area that I have.
That's the tough thing about year ones in business is everything. A lot of heavy lifting is up front, building a customer base, setting up social media, setting up a website, setting up your beds, setting up all your equipment, getting your crop planning down. A lot of this you only do once. At least you do you do 80% of that work once. And then it's like refinement and fine tuning unless you completely overhaul your business model. So year one almost has 2x the work of year two. And if you make it to year two, it's all right. all that stuff's already done. So now we can really focus on the ramp up, which I think makes sense for a year one of you already have so much you're doing anyway. Just focus on getting out alive. And then year two, it's all right. We made it through that stage. We're alive. Now we can focus on our putting on muscle and building a better house and that type of things. Year two, just at this stage of your life, how much does a farm like yours have to gross to get you to work there get you off the other job and be full time on the farm?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked me that, because it kind of something I wanted to mention was even though that next year will be like the official year one, this has been like many years in the making. Not just, oh, I've been studying this and dreaming about it, but we made a decision during the pandemic. Obviously, it's a very existential time for everybody, but we made a decision that it was like, this is the end goal. We didn't put like here's our 5-year plan, but it was like in the next somewhat tangible, foreseeable future, like we will hopefully start farming. And then it was like, so you know what we need to do? Like I've listened to enough people and seen it firsthand that it's probably going to be tight financially. So you know what? Let's go ahead and batten down the hatches and let's really minimize and lean out what it takes for us to live off of. And we're thinking, so we can save all this money so that we can then invest it into the farm, not realizing what that actually meant for us. It's funny how, sometimes you plan things and then life is, you thought you were planning for this, but it was actually for this. It realized that it was actually preparing me to be able to survive off of a farm worker income. But with that, we've pared way back to 2 cars that probably need new tires and this and that, whatever, but they're paid for. Living in a pretty nice rental house, but not trying to take on extra debt, like cutting up our personal credit cards just so we don't have the temptation, that sort of stuff. So with that being said, like we've been preparing for this for several years to where realistically to replace my income from what I'm doing, like I need to be able to gross like 35 to 40, and I wouldn't say comfortably live, but we'll make it unless something else happens. Lord willing and the creek don't rise, probably somewhere in the like 35 to 40 range, and we're doing it. We're making it happen.
Net or gross?
Gross.
Does your wife work?
Yeah. That's her still working. That's not me being the sole breadwinner. But no, if I really broke it down for you, we've really pared back our finances a lot to make this dream a reality. And when that's looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of kind of 20 at 40, that would be what I would need to replace what I'm doing. That's somewhere in the 25 to 26 a year is what I'd need to replace what I'm doing.
And so you've worked at Crystal Organic for 2 years. They've been in business since at least 93. I don't know when it even started, but so that's 30 years right there. He's obviously doing well on that. I forget, what's his acres under production? I know I've interviewed him, but I can't remember.
Yeah, I want to say now we're right at, because it's not that every square inch is full. There's areas because he has so much more space.
The whole lot of cover crops and stuff.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff that's in cover crop in between, like actual cash money production. But yeah, I want to say it's right at about 12 acres of production.
Okay. And you've probably seen or get some sense of what he can take off that property. So there's some proof of concept that you're not in insanity zone. And I think within the realm of market farming, anything below 50 grand, I don't want to say easily attainable, but I think It's easily attainable, I guess is the best way
Yeah.
to say it. I'm not discounting it's not hard work. I'm not
Yeah.
discounting it's not going to take time. But if you graft people who have farmed in market farms seriously for 10 plus years, 50 grand total gross income on the farm is at the left end of the bell curve. It's on the left side. So that's why I say it's, if you do it, if you're successful, it should be well more than that. So I think there's something there. We'll talk more most likely as your season progresses, but thinking forward to this year, what would you say your single biggest worry is as you sit here today?
Man, what's not a worry? No. Um,
Yeah,
I would
you can't
say,
say everything.
yeah, no, I would say one of them, and if anybody's listening, you better hear this and do the right thing, any of my people. But I've had a lot of cheerleaders over the last, like when I really committed to jumping into this farm thing, like full on, I've had a lot of cheerleaders and a lot of people who have supported me buying the stuff that I could just pull off my own property and so on and so forth. And, so there's definitely like a worry in the back of my head that it's when they see the reality of what I need to charge to, it's not grocery store prices, it's market prices. And that it's talk is cheap. So I think there's a little bit of a fear that it's like the group of people that I'm banking off, and I'm not going to just sell to those people. I'm eyeballing a couple of markets that are around me here. But I guess the biggest worry is that I wouldn't, that those people, like my bread and butter, wouldn't really be able to meet the expectation that I have. And I think also the biggest one is that I'm just leaving money on the table. I sowed a whole, like a 70-foot bed. I sowed a 70-foot bed of arugula, a 70-foot bed of Hackeri turnips, and then a 70-foot bed of a combination of like daikon and watermelon radish. And my germination rate was absolute crap. And so it's, oh man. And it mostly boiled down to I didn't get water on it fast enough because I just jumped the gun. I got too excited and I was like, remember, your goal was to like have production ready for the springtime. Why is it the end of October and you don't even have your irrigation set up yet and you're already seeding stuff? But definitely having the worry in the back of my mind that it'd be great if I can do $1,000 a week at a farmer's market, but let's hope that I'm not only producing $500 a week.
Yeah.
And
I think that first worry is justified, and I don't want to let air out of the balloon or sound cranky, but like I've seen this in the past with doing the conference, with doing stuff around my book of, hey, when I launch this book, can you help? Can you help? And it's real easy for people to be like, and then when it comes time for them to actually help, and even if it's a low lift help, you don't necessarily get that. So the take rate of yeses initially is, let's say 100%, you get 100. And then the people that actually yes, their yes is like 10% of that 100. So that's always deflating. And I think we just get, as humans, we're like, all right, yeah, I got all this support and nobody's going to let me down. And I know it sounds like I'm complaining. In a way I am, but I get it. Hey, life happens. Things change. People are busy. I'm asking something of them, that type of thing. But it is, yes, I got all the support. And then it's just like, wah, wah, wah. And you're like, oh, thanks. And I think it's just part of it all. I think it's like, hey, you use this knowing like, all right, whether it's like a game of cards, it's like, all right, these are the two cards that are flipped over first that I can see. All right, those I know I have potentially to work with. It's the rest of the draw that I'm going to have to make my hand out of. I can't necessarily depend on these cards. I know they're potentially there. I use them. So I think it is what it is. But I think you're going in with the right sense of of optimism, some skepticism, it seems really well thought out. I think there's a lot here. And yeah, maybe we can follow along as this goes on.
And I'd like to throw one thing in too that we haven't really talked about is, the benefit of coming from another farm is not just the like hands-on experience I get, or the questions ad nauseum that I ask. But like real practical things. Like I couldn't sing Nicholas and Jenny's praises more of, hey, like the property that I'm on is because of a connection that they had. They were the ones that put me in touch with the person that had the property. Nicholas is the one that it's, listen, like you need to charge this price. Like I know that you're going to want to charge less, but like you don't need to charge any less than like $4 a pound for this, because this is what it's worth. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And then also like on the real practical thing, it's, hey, I'm ordering a whole pallet of fertilizer and amendments. You can't do that. You can't afford 45 bags of whatever, but do you need some? Just tell me what you need. Ordered me a 7,000 foot roll of drip tape. I would have never been able to afford the shipping to send that to the property, but because it was a part of a whole thing. And then even let me take the JP1, let me take the Jang with me, let me take the pinpoint seeder to do all that sort of stuff. And that's invaluable to me that I have. And the cheerleading, listen, we want you to succeed. You're going to make it. To have a 30-year veteran who's been through like thick and thin, seen trends come and go or whatever, and then to be like, I see it in you and you can make it happen. That is like, if I had that alone, like that's enough motivation to be like, all right, yeah, this can become a reality. This can actually happen.
It's huge. And you talked about Joel Salatin earlier, and that's potentially one of your unfair advantages of, I have this relationship that's, it benefits me in multiple forms of capital. There's a knowledge exchange. There's the communal buying of things. There's tool exchange, all these things that can help. And I think that it's like everybody I've talked to along the years, one of the biggest pieces of advice they have for anybody who starts their farm is like, work at a farm full-time first for at least a full season. And you've done that for 2 years. You've not only got to see that farm go through all the seasons, but you have 2 years of relationship with that farm owner, which I think you've done a really good job of saying that's really valuable. And that can be a huge source of, it's like nitrous in an engine going forward.
Yeah. I cited another thing. They were gracious enough to cover my way towards the Georgia Organics Conference this past year. So I got to rub elbows with some of the best growers in the state, organic growers, and learn amazing things and all this sort of stuff. And me and the other guy who works there full time with me, we're both there, and we sat in kind of this like little like breakout discussion that was all just for farm workers, and everyone's like belly aching about their pay and belly aching about like, and then the cabin that I live in on the property that's drafty or whatever. And there's a couple people that are like farmers' rights and hardcore. And I'm over here, man, could I make more money doing something else? For sure. What's invaluable is like what I just told you. And it was like the mind, like just the wide open, oh my God, like you're not just an employee. It's like you're like you're almost a part of the family. And there's this whole level of like exchange and support there. And so I would just encourage anybody, like, yeah, if you like, go get a job at a farm, go actually learn, be in the trenches, make it through a full summer in the South of sweating your nuts off and just being completely just spent at the end of the day. But then also treat it like it's your own farm. In your own mind, be like, I am the farm manager and I'm going to take ownership in this place. And then when that pays dividends down the road.
No, absolutely. I love the approach of it all. To start to close this one out, I'm doing a new thing on the show. So you're gonna tag team off somebody who's in a previous episode. So every farmer I'm talking to now, I've asked them, what's a question you want to ask another farmer? So this is a farmer to farmer question. And then after this, you'll ask one for the next person. You won't know who it is, but I'll ask their question of you. So this is a question that comes from Becky Hume from Verdant Farm in Texas. And she said, I'm curious if there's any technology that you see coming down the pipeline that you're excited about or think is going to be a game changer for agriculture, not necessarily on your own farm, but is there any new tech or breakthrough that makes you excited or gives them hope about the future on their own farm or otherwise?
I would say on the technology side, just like straight off the top of the head, I saw a video from Ben Hartman on Instagram yesterday of Tillmore makes this like self-propelled wheel hoe. And it was like, oh my God, where has this been all my life? But I would say, yeah, some of these small tool companies, things like Paper Pot, I know they've been around. They're not new. Maybe I just don't have my finger on the pulse enough as far as what's coming down the road. But coming from a farm where, yeah, we use tractors for the majority of like bed prep, but when it comes to like cultivation and transplanting and all that, it's all by hand. And so I would say seeing some of these awesome market garden specific tools, stuff from like TerraTech, the stuff that's been coming out the last few years, that's super, super encouraging that it's, oh man, like the 30-inch bed thing is taken off. Like we're not just doing 5-foot center normal tractor stuff. Like I can pretty much buy everything I'm going to need for the farm that's like custom fit for market gardening. And so I would say that what I'm excited about in the future is as more of these things become available and become ubiquitous, that maybe some of these larger farms or more traditionally planned farms can make that transition to a more like high intensity, more leaner farming like market gardening.
Are there things you seeing tractors in use? Are there things that you saw tractors being used for that you think should be adopted more by market farmers? Like market farmers are resistant to tractors, and I think it could save a lot of people's backs, bodies, if you use different things like bed shapers and even for some sort of cultivation. You saw a farm with tractors, the market farming side. Are there, like, I guess the question is, are there things that market farmers would benefit from seeing when it comes to tractor culture?
Yeah, I think anything that involves like your back, like picking things up, like amazing knowledge. I don't even remember where I heard it from, but it was like, even if you're young and you're invincible, like work as if you're 60. And I have such a bad habit of doing this. I'm 30, I can handle this. Should I pick up these 50-pound bags one at a time? Probably, but let me do 3. And so I'd say any of the stuff. So it's not necessarily tractor work, but just more like mechanized work, stuff that can really take the load off of having to physically move things from place to place, whether that's like a motorized cart or like get a golf cart with like a garden trailer on the back of it. Or I know BCS makes that little baby compost spreader for 30-inch beds. I'm like, God, that seems so, yeah, it's probably a big investment, but in the long run, like you think about how many wheelbarrow loads that you're going to have to heave and then rake smooth on all these beds of compost, or you can just load this thing up and do that. Yeah, I would say that's probably, yeah, like don't be afraid of hard work. It's very noble. And I think it's a really big part of what we do, but also try to think long term. And do you want to do this every day for the next 40 years, or do you want to save yourself?
I like the thought. Now you thinking ahead, you don't know who the next person's going to be. It might not even be a farmer, but it's somebody that'll be involved in farm-based business. What's a question you would have for somebody involved in this field?
And I don't want anybody to give away their trade secrets, but
Feel free to ask for them.
yeah, I would say, what are the varieties to grow that you feel like are like your best kept secrets? What are the seeds? What are the plants that yeah, everybody grows champion collards in the South, but have you tried this one random weird one? Everybody loves it at market. What are your best kept secrets as far as varieties that you grow? Because I have mine, and I'm surprised I haven't brought them up because I sing their praises from every rooftop that I can. And they're probably not secrets. You can buy them from Johnny's, but they feel like those things that are like intrinsically mine that I don't see anybody else growing.
I like it. I think it's a really good one. Right on, Alec. For people who are following along or listening and want to follow along with the journey, is there anywhere online they can go to check you out?
Yeah. Check me out on Instagram, Crop Culture Farm. There, I try to do pretty regular posting. Obviously, with the build out, trying to do more content of like taking people through the journey of doing that, and occasionally post some like really philosophical, deep things in relation to farming. But yeah, I'd say that's it. And then hopefully soon check out my farm store on Grown By, and then the website coming down the pike here soon.
Today's episode is brought to you by Modern Grower. Let's face it, seeding in the nursery is tedious and time-consuming. Turn the drudgery into efficiency with the time and labor-saving Quick Click Seeder by Modern Grower. The Quick Click can seed a full nursery tray in seconds. It's fully compatible with all trays on the market, such as paper pot, airstrip, cell trays, prop tech, and more. The Quick Click can also be used for microgreens. Cut your time spent seeding by 75% with a Quick Click Seeder available at shop.moderngrower.co.